This episode is a perfect example of why I like ping pong. This is a perfect episode to explain why I continue to watch this series. There's a lot of information dumped on us this episode, and it really sets up the major themes of this series and what we should expect for the final endgame of this series. So let's talk about it. Okay, so the entire part with Tsukimoto and his sensei, Butterfly Joe. I knew that, Butterfly Joe was someone important, but I didn't realize he was that important, that special, that top tier up there in ping pong in the nationals. And we find out a little bit about his backstory. Finding out that Butterfly Joe technically is just like Tsukimoto is really crazy, if you think about it. I mean, Butterfly Joe was Tsukimoto. I mean, he acted the same, he would let people win, and his final match in the Nationals, to determine if he was the main victor, he was fighting his close friend that he knew since childhood that got a knee injury. His friend had a knee injury and could not play well, and it would be easy to beat someone that was injured. That's what, Butterfly Joe saw. But he self-destructed his own game and let his friend win. The reason why is because he didn't have the heart to crush his friend and probably destroy his entire career over one game, someone that he truly cared about. And that just shows you what type of character Butterfly Joe was, and so I love that. There's so much similarities between Butterfly Joe and Tsukimoto. Now we understand why Butterfly Joe wants to train Tsukimoto and tells him to stop being so caring for everybody else, and he needs to go straight out and do what he believes in and be serious and always win. Don't worry about anyone else. So, it's really shocking how much development that we saw in this episode. Not with just that entire part, but there's other parts. Okay, the amusement park section with Tsukimoto and his sensei, Butterfly Joe, that had a lot of meaning to it. What it meant was that Butterfly Joe is a father figure to Tsukimoto. As we find out this episode, which I guessed correctly last episode, Tsukimoto's parents have split up. His family, I'm guessing, is non-existent around Tsukimoto, and he's always been alone. And so, as we can see in this episode, Butterfly Joe has taken the representation of a father figure to Tsukimoto, so I like that a lot. It's really heart-touching. So moving past that part, let's move to another section. Another section was Kaio's school. We find out more about Kazuma. Kazuma, as we know, is a freaking badass player. He beat Pong in a match a couple episodes back, and he's just downright been a fucking monster. But we have been noticing in these past couple episodes, which I have failed to mention, is that there's been some form of romance between this other girl and him. And as we can see, this other girl is getting upset in this episode because Kazuma is not paying attention to her because he's too focused on table tennis. That's the only thing he cares about. That's the only thing he's actually watching. He doesn't care about actual romance. And that was very interesting, finding out more information about that, seeing that, there's other romance elements playing in the sidelines besides just ping pong. So I like how they're adding more world aspect to the entire series, and it makes Kazuma as a different type of character. It shows that Kazuma is more serious on ping pong. Now, let's move over to Peko. Peko, as we know, he was in an emotional slump last episode, and he eventually came to where he wanted to go from the basics, top from the bottom, and learn ping pong all over again. And what was interesting, this episode, we have the old lady that was training Tsukimoto in the beginning, was training Peko. Now, here's a theory. It hasn't technically been revealed yet, but it's pretty obvious by now. I have a feeling that old lady, that grandma that talks to Butterfly Joe all the time, most likely is a top-tier player also, and used to have competitions with Butterfly Joe in the past, and probably something else happened. But there was something very, very shocking about this episode. Some people could have missed, some people couldn't, but it depends on what you're really looking at. There was a scene in this episode with Peko where he had a bandage on his knee. Now, let's back up real quick. Let's back up to the beginning part of this review. Butterfly Joe fought a friend with a knee injury. Peko had a bandage on his knee because he said his knee didn't feel right. Now, let's put this in another perspective. Tsukimoto, Peko, they're great friends. They've known each other since a very long time. They're great childhood friends. Now, Butterfly Joe and his childhood friend, they fought for nationals. And what do we see going on here? Tsukimoto and Peko were both learning from great people, and my grandma theory is correct. And so, we're eventually going to get to a part in the series to where these two are going to square off for the final, nationals, the Inter-High, whatever it's called in this series, and Peko's going to have a knee injury that will cause Tsukimoto to be able to defeat him easily. Now, this will determine exactly if that will happen. If that does happen, that's a lot of irony, but I wonder if Tsukimoto will let Peko win. I have a lot of curious questions about that, but either way, I love how they're trying to wrap up past events and put it into this present section. Like, for instance, the entire section with Kazuma, okay? If we look at, we find out that Kazuma's father, the president of the school, is the person that fought Butterfly Joe in the past and had the knee injury. So, a lot of different meanings going on right here. A lot of irony going on in this episode. And I cannot wait to see exactly what direction this series takes. Because right now, Tsukimoto seems to be a really good player. But so does Kazuma. Kazuma's a fucking monster. And then we got Peko that's learning from the basics. And he's very talented. Because he can switch his playstyles back and forth. So, there's a lot of things that happen in this episode. And I know I'm missing a couple things that really happen in this episode. But that's the main points about this episode. The main points are pretty much stating that Kazuma, Peko, and Tsukimoto were all related by some form or fashion by their predecessors, their parents, or trainers. And that's what's shown in this episode. It also shows that past events are most likely going to happen in the future, especially with the knee injury. And so I'm looking forward to whatever's going to happen next, because this series is getting fucking good. Tell me your thoughts on it. Did you enjoy this episode? Did you hate this episode? What's your favorite moment about it? I love you all so much. Please be safe. Chibi out.